It's time for the 8-Minute Devotion. The 8-Minute Devotion is a daily message that fills you with hope and encouragement from the Word of God. Here's your host, Pastor Cameron Walcott.
Hello, and welcome back to the 8-Minute Devotion. I am so glad that we have this time together. So glad we have these 8 minutes of hope and life and encouragement that we can share from the Word of God. We are in our series, The Happy Life, really looking at the Beatitudes from Matthew 5, when Jesus said, "Blessed is the one who does this. Blessed is this one." That word blessed also can be translated as happy, and we're looking thus at these Beatitudes to see the keys to a happy life. And yesterday we started looking at Matthew 5:5, where Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Happy are the meek." And as we said yesterday, meekness, it's really about the holy acceptance of the circumstances God brings into our lives. It means we don't fight for our own rights. We don't fight for our own ways. We don't always say, "I have to stick up for myself." But we wait for God. We wait for God's timing. We wait for God's way. We wait for God to fight on our behalf. And we learn from Jesus. Jesus was not a weak man, of course. Jesus was the strongest man on earth. But yet what did he do? He surrendered his rights. Jesus said, "I am meek and lowly in heart." And we take his yoke upon us. We follow him on that path of meekness, not weakness. We follow him on that path of meekness, willingly surrendering his own rights. Today we're going to look at the theme, "Your gentleness has made me great," really by looking at two men in the Old Testament who are also examples of meekness. Your gentleness has made me great. The first one is Moses. Numbers 12:3 talks about how Moses was the meekest man on the face of the earth. That when he was criticized, when the people of God spoke against him, Moses over and over, he accepted it, even when it was unjust and unfair, and he waited for God to fight on his behalf. And if you remember, there were even times God said, "I'm going to judge the people because of what they're saying against you." And Moses, knowing the real heart of God, said, "Lord, please don't do that. Lord, please have mercy on them." And God responded to Moses' cry and did have mercy on the people. Moses was so meek. Now, did that mean that Moses was weak? Of course not. Moses had such power. Moses had such power from God that when he spoke, God sent the plagues. When he lifted his staff, the waters of the Red Sea parted. Moses was a man of great power, but he used that power so judiciously. And then the second Old Testament man I want to consider, David. David wrote this in Psalm 18 and verse 35. "You have given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand supported me, and your gentleness made me great." Notice the end of the verse. What does David say to God made me great? Does he say your power? Does he say your wars? Does he say your victories? No, David says your gentleness has made me great. A really fascinating truth that David brings out. It was the gentleness of God that made him great. And David was a man who knew how to fight battles. David was a man, of course, who did fight many battles. He was a man of war. But ultimately, his greatness, he realized, was not in the number of people he had killed. His greatness came from the meekness that God had placed in his heart, the gentleness, the fact that many times he did not want to fight. He had to, but it wasn't that David was just standing up for his own rights. He learned to fight God's battles and not just to stand up for himself. Friends, if we want to be truly great, we have to learn meekness. Not that we just are a doormat, but that we say, "God, I'm going to wait on you to stand up for me." Again, we're in a culture excuse me for that. We're in a culture that says, stand up for yourself, set your own boundaries. Does that really bring happiness? When you're always standing up for yourself, does that really bring happiness? I remember a question I got when I was teaching Bible school in another country. There was a young man who asked me this question. I was teaching on meekness, and he said, "Yes, but what if you give everything? You give your family everything. You've done nothing but give and give and give, and that's all you do is humbly give. You do it in humility, and your family doesn't appreciate you. Your church doesn't appreciate you. He asked me, what do you do then? And I said, well, look, you're expecting me to say, okay, this is when you stand up for yourself. This is when you fight. But what did Jesus do? Jesus wasn't appreciated, and he gave and gave and gave until God intervened on his behalf. Moses, David, these men learned not to stand up, not to fight for their own rights, but to wait for God. And of course, I also kind of alluded when I answered his question. If you tell me I've done nothing but give, and I've been so humble and no one appreciates me, what does that question show me? It shows me you probably have not really done it in humility. You probably have been demanding and expecting things from others. If you truly were meek and humble, if you truly were giving and giving and giving, you probably would not be expecting, hey, when do I get something back? When are you going to honor me? You're probably not really doing it from the right spirit. Friends, I've found the greatest happiness comes not when I fight for myself, but when I surrender and let God have his way and wait for his deliverance. That's exactly what Jesus said in the Beatitude. Happy are the meek. Happy are the meek. Not happy are those who stand up and fight, but our greatest joy comes when we surrender, when we allow ourselves. It might be painful for a while when we surrender that, when we swallow that offense, when we absorb that offense. But ultimately, it's the pathway to joy. And now for a minute, let's consider this amazing thing. What's the reward for the meek? They inherit the earth. Those who don't fight for the earth get the earth. Those who lay down their rights, in the end, they have everything restored. Those who are fighting end up with nothing. Those who are sacrificing get everything. If you sacrifice, you end up getting it all. Notice the reward isn't just in heaven, it even is here on earth. And we all know this. The most uptight, the most fighting for their rights people are usually the most unhappy. The ones who say, I have to stand up for myself here and here and here. They always find some other problem. They always find something else to stand up for. They always find some other injustice they need to speak up for. But those who are most apt to accept, to have a holy acceptance of their circumstances, are usually the most joyful because they're not looking for things to constantly be offended by. So which do you want to be? I encourage you to let God's gentleness make you great. Happy are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Thank you for watching and listening. We'll be back tomorrow on the 8-Minute Devotion.
Thank you for listening to the 8-Minute Devotion. Please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen to or watch it. And email us at the8minutedevotion@gmail.com with any questions or comments. May God bless you